Hello and welcome to the Martial Arts Teaching Tactics Podcast. I'm Chris Bean and I'm joined by Chris Kent. Hello, Mr. Kent.
Hello, sir.
Today we're going to talk about how we can motivate our students. Motivating your students is at the heart of what we do. If motivation is not there or not present on the teaching floor, your students won't show up. They won't want to be here. They won't continue to try as they are in their classes. So, Mr. Kent, is motivation a one and done type of activity?
No, sir. Just like you shower, you can't shower once and say that you're clean forever. You need to constantly reapply and find your motivation many times.
And why do you think motivating our students is so important?
I think motivation is like you said, at the heart of what we do, and being able to motivate them gives them the incentive and the drive to want to do better, perform better, or to reach for their goals and attain the things that they are working toward. I think without motivation, we'd have very boring and not fun classes, just showing up to go through the motions because it's 5:30 on a Monday, so it's time to do that, and there's nothing to look forward to. There's nothing to keep the classes interesting. So I believe as a drive and incentive to achieve their goals, and also as a good way to keep them engaged and keep them involved in the classes themselves and make it fun, is all of that relies on motivation.
Yeah, not only that, but a motivated student will show up to class, they'll do what they're supposed to do, they're motivated, they'll work hard in class, they'll do what you ask them to do because that's what they want to do. They're motivated to do it. They want to achieve better skills on their information. They want to better themselves. They want to be there to learn everything that you have to teach them. Now, as far as motivation goes for our students, is that a blanketed motivation? So can I do one motivation tactic and that cover and work for each and every one of our different students?
I would love to say yes, but similar to how we all learn differently and the different learning styles, we are all motivated by different things. And so being able to vary and pull from the toolbox with a myriad of ways to motivate people is essential as martial arts instructors, because not everyone's the same. Not everyone is going to be excited or fired up to do the class or do what you ask them to do because of the way you're motivating them. You might have to find a different way to motivate all the people in your class. So no, I don't think that motivation is a blanket thing. It's different for every person.
Yeah, and this can be a challenging area to traverse because one tactic that might motivate somebody might completely demotivate another student. And so we have to be kind of careful how we present those or how we try to motivate our students, because if we go too far in one direction, that can have the opposite effect on the students. They can be demotivated instead of motivated.
Right, and the balance there too is, like you said, one thing that motivates one student might demotivate another student. So you have to either make sure that you're using both types of motivation or finding a third middleman that would motivate everyone equally. And you have to remember too that the motivation should be fun and exciting. It should get your students inspired, but they also need to be focused and concentrated. So if you're constantly motivating in ways that distract your students or ways that throw them off topic or take away from their concentration and focus, then that's really, you're working against yourself and doing the opposite of what you want to do. So it's difficult when you can't use that one blanket motivational tactic. You have to rely on many of them, but also be aware of the pitfalls and the downsides to both of them or all of them that you end up using. And it's a tough balance, because like I said, it would be nice if there's just one way to motivate everybody, but you got to know your students and build the relationships with them to be able to discover how they are motivated, but then also make sure that you are not taking away from someone else's training.
Yeah, and so as far as our class schedule or lesson plan goes, it's important that we don't go too long on one drill or one type of movement, because doing something for too long, especially at the especially at the different ages that you might have students at, it's difficult to focus all of your attention on one movement for a length of time. And so kind of having a idea of how long your drills should be in class is important. And so as a baseline for us, if we have students that are 6 years old or younger, we want to switch up the moves or the drills about every 5 minutes. So in those classes, drills last for 5 minutes, and then they move on to the next thing. And that 5 minute drill is they're up and moving and they're doing stuff. They might have a little bit of sit down so somebody else can do something, but more often than not, in that 5 minutes, they're moving and they're active that whole time, because at that age, 6 and younger, they want to be moving. Their bodies need to be moving to get their energy out, and switching up the drills quickly, 5 minutes only on one area before you move to the next, is important for them, because that helps to keep their attention for that length of time as well.
Absolutely. That in itself can be a challenge as well, though, because it's a 5 minute drill. It's a short drill, so you take a few minutes to explain it. You get into the actual drill where they're training and practicing, and you finally feel like you're in a groove of getting that drill down, that exercise down, and everyone's getting it and understanding, and you hit that sweet spot. And then almost immediately it's over because you're switching to the next drill, which I agree with. I think it's good to keep them switching and keep the variety in the class up as well. But I will say it is frustrating sometimes to finally feel like you get it, and then, oh, time's up, I got to switch to the next thing or whatever. And we generally do stick to that rule of 5 minutes per exercise or 5 minutes per drill. The only thing I can think of as an exception would be like a stripe test or a skill test, because sometimes, that might take a little bit longer, but then you can play it off and say, hey, this is your test. Even when you're not right in front of me doing the techniques, when you're sitting down, I'm grading you on how you sit. Are your legs crossed? Is your back nice and straight? Your hands on your knees? Are you talking to everyone around you? Are you waving at mom and dad? Are you taking your uniform off and not paying attention and doing all those things? And that can be a motivator too. Just, I got my eye on you. I'm watching you perform well, or you won't be able to get this stripe, or you won't be able to progress or move on. So I do think that is a good rule to stick, at least at that age level, to a shorter amount of time for each drill, except for those exceptions of the stripe tests that are just going to have to take longer. But, it can be challenging because it is a shorter amount of time and a shorter window for you to really get in the groove of the drill before you switch into the next one.
Yeah, and so for ages that are 7 through 12, you want to stick to about a max of 10 minutes per drill. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do 5-minute drills. 5-minute drills for that level is great. Do those all you want. But as far as the length of time, 10 minutes would be max for 7 and 12. Now, this would be in the early stages. As you have the students advance and progress through your ranks, and you end up in the black belt or your higher end classes, those drills maybe can push into the 15-minute mark, but only after they have an opportunity to understand how their body moves, how you teach, and how the class flow and structure is going to go. Especially in about the first year and a half, you want to stick to 10 minutes for the ages of 7 through 12, just because that's where their max attention span is going to be at.
Once again, the difficulty with that is when you have ages 7 through 12 lumped in with adults, people that are older that could, it's never a good idea, but theoretically they could do the same thing for the whole class if you ask them to. You don't want to do that. You still want to switch up the drills and vary what's going on. That way they get good practice on everything and they're not getting bored with the repetition and all that stuff. But, a 15-minute drill for an adult is easier than it is for a 7, 12-year-old. And sometimes you have those adults who actually need more time. We're doing a drill for 10 minutes and we're about to move on, and you can just tell by their face that they wish they could do that drill a handful more times. They wish they could practice that one thing a few more times, and luckily it's nice to have that because they understand the importance of that, and they're able to motivate themselves, or if it's just the belief or the understanding that, if I'm going to remember this, I have to do it 20 more times. And you don't have to motivate them as much. It's still a level of motivation is required for adults, but I would say that at that point in time, mostly they have that internal motivation. They can motivate themselves, but that's the nice thing too, is you can stick to a 10-minute drill with adults, but they have that capacity to do a longer drill, but trying to cater to the younger ages that are stuck with the adults as well is going to give you that more variety and help them with their training. But it would be nice if we could cater to the adults more and say, hey, what do you need to most work on? Let's spend X amount of time on this until you feel good with it. Then we can move on to this next thing, or this next thing or whatever, because I'm sure a lot of them feel like they need more practice, which they might not find the time to do at home. It's easy to tell to kids, hey, go home and practice. You have so much free time, which some adults do as well. They just have free time that they are using poorly. Well, I think we're all guilty of that. But it's easier for them to also justify not practicing and just doing it while they're there. So just being aware of the different age groups and what their capacities are, whether it be the young under 6 or 7 to 12 or 12 and up in the adult ages, and being able to keep the motivation level up, or keep the variety up, and keep the fun and exciting drills varied throughout the class is very important to keeping everyone motivated.
For older students, 12 and up, you can push into that 15-minute mark. Again, going to the 10 and the 5-minute drills as well. 15 minutes for even for the adults, I feel like is right about the max of what most of them can keep their attention for. Even for us in our black belt classes, 15-minute drills, we have them, but there's no 20-minute drills. There's no 17-minute drills, 15-minute drill, and then we move on to whatever the next thing is. And more often than not, those 15-minute drills are spent on reviewing older information, going through their quote-unquote basics, their hand-foot techniques, their forms, stuff that they know, but still information that I want to keep them fresh on and drill so they have a good grasp of. But 15 minutes is even the max, even for those classes. Doesn't matter really for their age. At that point, they're going to be a little bit older. They know how their body is going to move. They understand how the movements are going to interact with the time of the class. So 15 minutes, even for those guys, is the max that we go through for our classes here.
These time limits aren't set in stone either. They're not rigid. So let's say I'm working on a form or a pattern of moves, and for whatever reason, everyone's having trouble understanding it, or everyone's having trouble getting the moves down, or there's even just one person who isn't quite getting it yet. Just because it's a 10-minute drill doesn't mean I can spend an extra 5-7 minutes on that. If they need the practice and the repetition, we can definitely flex the schedule and put that into practice. It's not like, 15 minutes are up. Guess you didn't get it. Sorry, got to move on. Next thing. That's the nice thing too, is being in control of that and being able to go with the flow of the class and being able to adjust those things depending on what the students need. It's good to have that control. It's good to have that control and that ability to tweak things according to how the class is going.
Yeah, and in some of those situations, if you have that one or two students that are having troubles, if you have the private lesson or the one-on-one lesson somehow in your system, in your schedule, have the student set up a one-on-one lesson. And even for those one-on-one lessons, people can and sometimes do schedule a half-hour block for themselves. And that's fine. We go through those things. We still like to switch up the drills that we do within that block of time. But I have found over my time teaching that multiple 15-minute lessons spread out over weeks of time are far more beneficial than an hour block of time all at one time. And so despite having the availability of doing, yeah, sure, you can come in for an hour lesson. I got time for you. We'll make sure you are all set and ready for that. To me, that's cramming, and cramming works for some time, but nearly right after the test, if not immediately after the test, that information is gone. And the way the martial arts program works, at least for us, that can't work that way. It has to be a ongoing learning, meaning I test over this material, and then my next test has that material plus this. My next test has that material plus this, and so on and so on. So each time I'm adding information, I'm not swapping information around.
I think we're lucky as well, because the martial arts themselves are designed in a way that almost every specific thing that we do is done with the idea of motivation. And so what I mean by that is, we start the class with a warm-up. When we warm up, the whole purpose of the warm-up is to, number one, get them physically ready for class, but that's also to raise their spirits and their energy level and get them excited and and ready to perform when it comes time for their actual drills and practices. And moving on from that, the drills themselves, that's the way that we present them and demonstrate them and get them involved in them, again, is to make it fun and engaging and up their enthusiasm and their focus or concentration. And moving from there, we get our mat chat. We sit down and we share with them important life lessons that they can use in their life and use to better themselves as people, which hopefully should be exciting, especially depending on how you convey that message or how you deliver that information. It should be motivational. It should leave with a challenge. Like, hey, take what we talked about today throughout the next week. Use that. When you come back, I'm going to check with you and see how you use that. And there's that implementation as well. And of course, if they do a good job during class or just designed in, every once in a while, we'll play a game with them. And everyone loves to have that game. And even at the beginning of class, if you know you're going to play a game later, you can throw it in by saying, hey, if you guys do a good job today, if you behave, if you focus, if you concentrate, if you perform well, then maybe we can play a game. And even though you already have that game scheduled, no matter what, you can kind of play it off as like, oh, you did a good job today, so you earned this game. This is your reward for behaving or doing well. So everything in martial arts, we have the benefit that it is designed with motivation in mind, because we understand how important motivation is to performance and to learning and to getting them to actually want to learn by being motivated. So I think we're lucky in that aspect. But of course, it all comes down to us because the system is in place. If we don't deliver the information and we don't get out there and make it work, then it's just an idea and not an actual thing. So that's where our part is played and where we come into implementing those motivational parts of the class.
And we talked a little bit about praise, correct praise before. And praise, correct praise is a great way to get your students to open up and be ready to accept the correction, and then you praise them afterwards. So we give them a praise and we say, hey, that was really awesome. You had this really good. And if you have this, that would be the correction, it would be even better. And so they go through, get them to have that correction made, then you praise them on that correction. Another option or another avenue of approach to that, for that praise, correct praise, is friendly competition. And so you can use friendly competition as you're going through your class and say, hey, listen, that was awesome, Johnny. That you had an amazing front stance. That's picture perfect. Good job. And then you look at Sally, who's right next to him, and you say, Sally, do you want Johnny to beat you? Are you going to let a boy beat you in this? And of course, she's not going to let the boy win. So she says, no, sir. And then you go to Johnny, are you going to let the girl win? No, sir. And so they have a competition going between themselves on who can do a better stance or whatever the movement is. And those two, you set up that competition for it. But because the whole class was able to hear what just happened, everybody else that could hear is going to have that same competition because nobody else wants Johnny to beat them. Now, Sally is in the direct competition, a friendly competition. They're not battling trying to hurt each other. Not battling trying to hurt each other. There's a friendly competition, but those two are in competition with each other. But just because you had that opportunity to set that up like that, it will have the effect of everybody else in the class also in competition with Johnny in that situation.
Right, and I think that the important thing that you mentioned many times, of course, is that it's a healthy competition or a friendly competition. We're not pitting them against each other. Really, the goal is not to win. I think the goal is to set a positive example. And so if we can get that little competition going in them and maybe never even saying, okay, well, Sally won that one. Good job, Sally. We just use that throughout the class and be like, hey, don't let them do better. Or don't let her do better than you are doing or him do better than you are doing. And being able to play that competitive game with the goal of improving each other, not the goal of simply winning and being quote unquote better than the next person. I think that's the key to that's the healthy or the friendly part of that competition, because it is a competition. I'm pitting one person against the other one, but it's not with the goal of beating them or being better than them. It's to improve your technique, improve yourself, and have a little bit of fun as you're doing it as well, because some people will just play the game simply because they don't want to lose. Again, not that we're crowning winners and losers, but you start a competition, you start a game, they could care less about the game, but they just don't want to lose. So of course they're going to try their best to improve their technique, improve their skills as that game is going on, because they don't want to lose. They don't want to feel like they lost or did a bad job. And it's also a relationship building skill, or not skill, but technique, because it helps you to not only make new friends with some of the students in your class, but to strengthen the friendship you already have. Because when Johnny is competing against Sally, yes, they're against each other, but really they're together and they're working to help each other do a better job, whether they realize it or not. They're really helping each other improve. And so it's emphasizing those social interactions and teaching them not to be overly competitive, because this is like a controlled competition in the sense that like we are the ones judging the competition, if you want to call it that. And so we don't let people win. We don't hand it to them, but then we also don't emphasize, hey, yeah, Sally, Johnny really did a good job and did way better than you. So maybe you need to work on your techniques a little bit better. You need to get better. You didn't do as good of a job. But we want to be able to motivate them against each other and with each other and as friends. And of course, the harder one person's trying, the harder everyone's going to try. And it's going to also increase the amount of exercise they get. So there's just so many benefits to healthy competition. But as of course, keep in mind that we don't want to create students who are overly competitive. We don't want to create animosity between the students. It's not, I'm doing this to crush you and absolutely destroy you. We're doing this to improve ourselves and make ourselves better, and to motivate each other and to reap the benefits of this competition as well.
Yeah, and there's a couple key points I think we talked about, or that you mentioned there, that I want to hone in on. Number one is, from time to time, I will say, hey, listen, Johnny, Sally just did a better front stance than you. And so I will tell, hey, not that there's a winner, but I'm going to let them know, giving them feedback as we progress through the movement. Hey, this so-and-so is doing better than you. And then, okay, now this person's doing better. I'll go back and forth on that when they genuinely are doing better, so that motivation is there to it keeps that alive. It's not one and done. I just say it, okay, then I can just leave it alone. I want to keep touching back on that so that they know that I'm still watching for that. So not to say that I crown a winner at the end. That doesn't happen. But I do say from time to time, hey, Sally's doing better stance than you now. I thought you weren't going to let her beat you. No, sir. And then, okay, Johnny, you're now, or Sally, Johnny's doing better stance than you now. I thought you weren't going to let him beat you, right? And then so you have that back and forth. So I don't necessarily crown a winner, but I do say from time to time, hey, listen, they are now doing better than you. And then that reinvigorates them. That gets them ready to do it again. It remotivates them to go back to that. Another part to this is the way you set it up. The tonality, your voice inflection, your mindset behind doing that motivation tactic of the healthy competition is key. If you set it up like, all right, now listen, Sally, you better not let Johnny beat you in that front stance. Do a better job. Come on. If you set it up like that, you have that tone of voice to you, that's going to put the whole situation in a much different type of atmosphere. And you want to keep it a friendly, healthy atmosphere. So if you set it up the way we talked about before, hey, Sally, listen, are you going to let Johnny beat you in the front stance? No, sir. And then you go to Johnny, are you going to let Sally beat you in the front stance? No, sir. All right, well, I'm going to be watching. I want to see who's going to do a better one. If you set it up like that with a healthy type of atmosphere about it, it will be far and away better for you and for the students, everybody involved. So just be careful about how you go about that.
And when you're talking about setting it up too, the beautiful thing about healthy competition is you don't have to let everyone in on the competition. Meaning you can have one student who you know needs a little extra motivation, or is able to rely on a lot of internal motivation within themselves, and you can simply walk over to them and ask them and say, hey, they're in class today. I want you to think about being the best student in this room. Ask yourself, is there anyone else here doing better than I am? Now, I don't let everyone else in the class know that I told them that, but the whole time they're in class, they're thinking to themselves, am I the best one in here right now? Am I doing the best I possibly can? And again, not to pit them against their teammates and their classmates, but we want them to have that motivation for themselves. I don't want it to always have to be, hey, it's you versus them, or it's you against this other person. If you can simply ask yourself, hey, am I the best one in this room? I'm doing the best that I can. for myself. I think that's a whole other level of motivation as well. And we can talk later about external versus internal motivation, but being able to ask yourself, hey, not even comparing myself to other people, am I doing the best that I know I can do? And maybe even setting up the healthy competition within yourself or even against yourself. Last week I did, an 8 out of 10, 10 being a good job. So today I'm going to do my best to make it a 9 and then keep going up from there. And competing against yourself too is another way that the healthy competition can be utilized.
Yeah, and again, the healthy competition, there's so much that we can dive into to really pick this apart because it's such a useful tool to use on the floor. But something to keep in mind is if you have that healthy competition with Jonathan, who's the top of the class, and you have Jackson, who is, quite frankly, not the top of class. He's nearly the bottom, or he is the bottom of class. If you compete those two against each other, that's going to end well. That's going to end poorly for everybody. It's going to give the top of the class a big head. It's going to give the lower class, the student at the lower end of the class, it's going to demotivate them. And so when you are doing this healthy competition tactic on your floor, just be mindful of who you are pitting against each other. Make sure that other person is actually able to live up to the standards of the first person, or that you know that you've seen that person perform better previously, and then you just try to pull that out of them this time. So just be very mindful about that. And another part of healthy competition is this is a great tool to use when you are understaffed. When it's just you on the floor with however many students that you think is too many perhaps for you at that given time, utilizing that healthy competition in your class is a key concept or a key method that you can use to help almost to copy yourself or to duplicate yourself and put yourself in different situations. Because once you set up that healthy competition with these two students in the back of the class, and then you set up a different healthy competition with the other two students in the front of the class, while you're not standing at the back of the class watching them and monitoring them, they're doing it for each other. They're doing it for you. And then you have the students in the front of the class that are competing on something different entirely. They're monitoring that back and forth on their own. You don't have to be there to do that. Now, of course, you need to go in to each of those situations and check on those. But it helps to almost divide yourself or copy yourself throughout different places on the floor, because that puts them on the lookout for those different items that you want them to be watching for anyways. And so that is a great tool to have when you are understaffed, or if you're the one-man show or the one-woman show and you have too many students or too many students for that specific drill you think, that is a great way to traverse that area. And as far as the motivation goes for our students, they will feed off of whatever energy we give them. And if you don't believe this, I'll set up a opportunity for you to try this. Next time you're on the floor, if you think that your energy doesn't have an impact on how the class goes, then try this. Run through a set of basic movements. For example, we'll go through some hand techniques. If I go through the hand techniques like this, okay, students, come to attention. Okay, ready, stance. All right, now I want you to do your low block. Go. Okay, other side. Go. And you go through the gambit of moves like that, you will see quickly, maybe they'll start at an okay energy level, but their energy level will quickly drop by the time you get into that drill. However, if you call them to attention, all right, students, let's come to attention. Yes, sir. Okay, hands out, ready, stance. All right, now listen, guys, we're going to do your low block. I want to see some awesome low block. Stay focusing on your stances as we go through this drill. Ready, low block, and go. All right, other side, ready, go. And you give them that energy as they go. They will feed off of that energy. And the nice part about that is once you get that energy flowing, it just takes one or two of the students to catch that energy, and then they can multiply that throughout the rest of class. That's the synergy type of effect in your class. But if you don't have that energy to start with, if you can't get the ball rolling for that, it's not going to be there. One or two students might be able to carry it for a little bit of time, but it will quickly drop because they don't have the energy from you. And if you don't believe me, again, try that. Try that on the floor. If it doesn't work for you, let me know. If you can teach a class at this energy level and your students can perform at the energy level that you want them to be at while you are at this energy level, please let me know, because I want to know how you can manage that.
You have to be motivated yourself. Your energy level is going to set the tone for the entire class. So sometimes it's as simple as remembering what you're doing, remembering why you're doing it, and drawing on that motivation. But like you said, you set the tone. You are the example that everyone else is going to follow. So your energy level really determines what kind of class that your students are going to have. So having that high energy level, even if you're faking it, even if it's not real, but as always, that faking it until you make it, eventually it's gonna make it for you and for the students. And even if the whole class you really aren't feeling it, but you're able to put on that, so to speak, act of behaving the way that you need to behave, then that's going to help motivate your students and drive them to perform well, as you are the one that's setting the tone, and they can mirror and feed off of you, and vice versa. Once you get them going, you can feed off of them, and you guys kind of work together in that, as you said, synergistic way, and developing a good source of motivation, but also the teamwork, working together, and again, stressing those points of being in competition, but in a healthy kind of way. I think it's important too to remember that our goal is not to always be there with our students hovering over their shoulder or whispering in their ear, "All right, good job, do that move again. That was awesome. Keep working hard. Nice job. Keep going. Awesome. Great work. Super." We don't want to be their only source of motivation. We want to instill motivation inside of them so that way they can call on it later and use their discipline to help them as they're practicing. So we already kind of discussed that healthy competition can be within themselves too. Think to yourself, hey, am I doing better than everyone else here? Or am I doing better than a past version of ourselves? But some other ways we can help to instill that motivation into them personally is asking them to rate themselves. And of course, when we're asking them to rate themselves, we're asking them to compare themselves now to a past version of themselves, not me compared to you. So when we're doing the move, I'm like, oh yeah, my move's at a 7, but Mr. Bean's at a 5, so I'm way better than he is. No, the idea is to rate yourself. And, maybe I'll do one low block, and that low block was a 5. I can do better. I do another one. That one was a 7. Okay, I feel pretty good about that one. Rating yourself and giving yourself a grade on how you're performing can be a great way to motivate yourself and drive you to do better, as long as you remember it's not me versus somebody else when I'm doing that. I'm not judging or comparing my technique or skill level to another student. I'm comparing myself in the past and in the present as well.
I think a key point to that is when you judge yourself or grade yourself on a scale from 1 to 10, keep a idea that 10 is the best, not 1. Often outside of martial arts classes, everybody wants to be number 1. They want to get first place. They want to get the first place trophy. They want to be number 1 at this or that or whatever. Not everybody can be number 1. Only one person can be number 1. But anybody and everybody that is trying their best can be a number 10, their own best. And judging themselves on that own internal scale from 1 to 10, meaning 10 is the best, the most effort, the highest standard they set for themselves, and trying to hold that line and stay at that high number 10 standard, as opposed to looking at it like, I want to be number 1. And that just changes the whole outlook on that whole grading scale. So changing that from not trying to be number 1 at everything, but trying to do your best, your internal best, and doing your number 10 best, I think is an idea to keep in your mind as you're going through that.
Another way to instill that motivation in them is to ask them to practice as if it's real. Of course, practicing as if it's real is going to be a later step in their training, because when they're first learning a move, they're going to be awkward and clunky, and it's going to take them time to figure out how to do those techniques. But after you've been doing it for a while, just remind them, hey, I want you to train as if it's real. If you were in a real life scenario, someone was trying to hurt you or attack you, how would you defend yourself? Would you throw your move with low power and not a lot of speed and very little intensity, or would that be a quick motion with as much power as you can physically muster at that point in time, as fast as you physically can, in order to protect yourself and to keep yourself safe? So asking them to train as if it's real, it helps to add another layer of power and intensity and work on developing that strength as they are training, because we want them ultimately to be able to take care of themselves and protect themselves. But that alone can be a great motivator to think, oh, if this is actually happening to me, what would I do? And remind them that the way that they practice is going to be the way that those things happen. Of course, there's a whole other discussion we can have about the intensity levels and what might actually happen in a real life scenario. But at the very least, the way they practice is what's going to happen. So if they're not practicing with intensity and practicing with purpose, then I think that's a detriment to them. And maybe to help with that, as we're teaching things, we need to explain to them why they're doing what they're doing. Like, why is my hand in this position? Why is it going to this position? What is happening with this technique as I'm doing it? And maybe even physically show them the difference of, okay, here's me doing it with low intensity. Here's what it looks like. Okay, here's a high intensity, good power, good speed type move, and be able to show them what it should look like as they're practicing. And then have them go off and practice on their own and keep that in mind as they're motivating. So again, just trying to instill that motivation in them without us having to be over their shoulder, reminding them every however long it is, oh, that was good, nice, good work, good job. Because some people, if they're not able to find that motivation within themselves, then they just can't perform to a high level, or just it's hard enough to just practice your moves at all, because they need that person on their shoulder whispering to them. But we can't do that physically, and it's a good skill to have, to be able to motivate yourself.
And one way that we keep that idea alive on the floor is we are asking our students 3 questions while they're going through training at really any level that they're at. And the questions are, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And is it real? And with those 3 questions, they're finding out, okay, what am I doing? Oh, I'm doing this defense for a front choke. Why am I doing it? Well, I'm doing it because this person's choking me, and I don't want this person to choke me to do it anymore. And is it real? Is it real? Are they doing it as if they actually had to defend themselves? And are they doing it with the speed, intensity, the power, although not hitting their partners, but the power that they need to defend themselves outside of here in a altercation? Now, while they're learning the moves, those 3 questions aren't present at the beginning, meaning I can't on the first day, the first time they're doing that front choke defense. Okay, now I just taught this to you. Are you doing it? What are you doing? Well, I'm doing a front choke. Why are you doing it? Well, because this person's choking me. Is it real? They can't do the is it real part yet, because they don't have the reps in. They don't have the muscle body connection to be able to move their bodies through those motions at the intensity or speed or power that they need at that time. And in fact, if that happens too early, somebody's going to get hurt. And so it's important to have those 3 questions, those 3 principles in your class. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And is it real? But it's also important to keep that in check. You can't do that from the get-go. As soon as they learn a move, you can't ask them, is it real? You can ask them, what am I doing and why am I doing it? So they know the ins and outs and what they're doing and why they're set to do those moves. But the is it real part won't happen until they've had some reps, time practicing that movement. And so I think that those 3 questions are a key point to getting them to the level that they need to be at. But it's important to keep in mind that is it real part will happen after the reps, after they've had time training that movement.
Another way to instill that motivation inside of them is to teach them how to coach themselves. Teach them how to be able to correct themselves as they are doing their moves, and ask themselves, hey, was that the best I could do? Was that the level that I should be performing at, or the level that I'm capable of performing at? Being able to coach themselves and acknowledge the things that they've improved and acknowledge the things that they still need to improve. And then be able to set goals for themselves to, hey, by 2 weeks from now, I want to have this move down to this level of intensity and be able to look like this when I'm doing it. Or I want to, by 2 weeks from now, know how to do this move well without having to stop and think about what's going on, and being able to coach themselves, because again, we're not going to be there with them all the time. And even if I'm in the same class as them, like you said, if I have a big class and it's just me, I'm not able to watch everyone at once. I want to be able to say, hey, practice this. Ask yourself, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Is it real? Set this goal for yourself. I'm going to go teach this kid over here. I'm going to come back and check on you, and I want to see how you're doing. So we kind of set up that scenario for them, maybe even give them a goal to work toward, but then we walk away and let them have the autonomy and the ability to practice that themselves and work on that as they are training. So being able to help them develop the skill of coaching themselves, whether we're in class or outside of class, is going to set them up to be able to instill or to have that motivation instilled in them when we are not there, when we need them to have that because we can't give it to them.
And I think that part of that motivation, part of that level of discipline and their goal that they have to perform that move at comes from us, the instructors. One of John Maxwell's laws of leadership from the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership is the law of the lid. And essentially what the law of the lid is, your team can only go to the level that you show them. Your students will only be able to perform the moves at the level that you show them. Meaning if you show them your number 7, your students will strive and try to get to that level 7, your level 7, which might be their level 10 and a half or 11, really. But if you show them the level 10, your level 10, then that means that they will strive for that level 10, meaning their lid is higher up. It's actually where your lid is. And so it's important that when we are working with our students, when we're demonstrating the moves, when you show them your level 10, they will be able to live up to that. If you only show them a level 7, they will only live up to that level 7. And so raising their lid, raising their level that they can perform at just by showing them what the level should look like, I believe is an important part to motivation. If you are lowering your moves, you're lowering your output when you're demonstrating the moves, the students can only be motivated to do that much. And perhaps even a percentage less than that because they're the students, they're not the instructor. They haven't done it nearly as many times as us, the instructors, have. So keeping that law of the lid, your team will only go as high as you show them. And if you are only at a level 7, then they can only be at a level 7. And again, perhaps even lower than that because they are the students, not the instructors in this scenario. Again, law of the lid, very important as we are on the floor demonstrating and just being there. Not just in our physical movements, but in the way we interact with the students, the way everything that we do on the floor, I think that we need to do as a level 10 because that will transcend into them and give them the opportunity to live up to that expectations that we set for them.
And that can be our motivation as leaders, as instructors, when we are training ourselves. That can be a good motivator to try our hardest and work to strive and to strive to improve ourselves because we want to set a great example for our students. And if we're being honest, there are days when we don't want to train, we don't want to do what we're doing. There's days when we just aren't feeling it. But keeping that in mind, that we, not in a selfish or egotistical kind of way, but we want to be the example. We want to be what our students are striving for. And it really is a disservice to them if we are not on top of what we're doing and doing our best, whether it be showing one move or just a section of a move or whatever. We need to do that. We need to do that with a high level of efficiency. That way they have that example to look up to and to strive towards. So not only is that important for motivating our students, but that we can use that on our own personal motivation as well. As we touched on earlier, motivation can be that external or internal. So I don't think we need to go into much detail about it because it's pretty self-explanatory, but the external being something from the outside motivating you to do better, or the internal being you telling yourself, hey, what am I rating myself on a scale from 1 to 10? Do I have these goals set? What am I striving to achieve in these goals? Am I working on training as if it's real? So at the beginning type level, I think motivation will be a lot more of the external, someone from the outside or something from the outside motivating you to do better. But as we train and as they grow and develop as martial artists and as people, the ideal is for that to shift to become more of an internal type of motivation where, yeah, there can be times when you still need someone else to encourage you or something else to encourage you, but more often than not, you want to be able to call upon those skills and those internal motivators that you have developed and learned over the years to help yourself perform to a high level and to keep striving to be better. And of course, these things are going to change over time. When you're a white belt and you're first starting out, you're going to be motivated differently than you are when you're a black belt and you've been doing it for X amount of years. And being able to identify what motivates you at different times and really lean into that, I think is an important part of being highly motivated as well. Because I know I can attest for myself at this point in time, having done martial arts for a really long time, sometimes I just have to show up and get the job done. I'm not excited about it. I'm not really looking forward to doing it, but I know that it's going to make me better as a martial artist or make me better as a person. So that is my motivation. When I can tell you as a white belt, I just wanted to have fun. I wanted to come to class and have a good time, and that might not be the case anymore, but I still need to find a reason to be motivated to get things done. As always, we want to keep in mind influence over authority. We want to be a positive influence on our students rather than a demanding source of authority as well.
While we're going through our drills, if we notice the students' attention drifting or their motivation dropping, something that we can do on the floor is have a pattern interrupt. And basically what that is you have your pattern of class, the quote unquote standard class that you're going through for whatever level the students are at. You just interject something different. And so that can mean, okay, we're doing our drill on our low block, and the students, they're at the 2.5 minute mark, but they're just not feeling it today. Their attention isn't there. I've done a handful of tools already. It just isn't working. Okay, you know what? This is what we'll do. We're going to stop. So I want everybody to do 15 jumping jacks, and then I want everybody to jump up as high as you possibly can. I want to see who can jump the highest, and you put, give them a little bit of opportunity to have something different. You do a 15 jumping jacks. Okay, that's nothing. Really, at any level, that 15 jumping jacks should be nothing. And you have a little bit of a game atmosphere as well. So you challenge them to see who can jump the highest. And, oh man, all right, Jackson, that was an amazing high jump. All right, now let's get back to our low block. And you have that little bit of time separation between what they were doing before, give them a little bit of opportunity to be active, but not saying, okay, do 45 push-ups. All right, now do 75 sit-ups. That's not quite the pattern interrupt that you're going to need in that situation. But you give them just a little bit, have a little bit of an energy out to bring their energy up. Then you give a little bit of a game type atmosphere, just real quick. Okay, who can jump the highest? All right, ready, go. Wow, all right, Jackson, that was awesome. All right, now let's get right back to that low block. Having that pattern interrupt, and you can, there's a ton of different variations or versions of this that you can do. I'm sure you can come up with many of them on your own. That was one I just threw out there. But having that pattern interrupt will be very helpful to help re-energize and refocus your students on whatever the other thing that you're doing. Just having that small separation from it and then having the opportunity to go back to it will be very important.
Talking about unrealistic expectations, having them do 45 push-ups or 75 sit-ups or whatever, when you're seeking that motivation or trying to draw that energy out of your students, it's important to be careful the amount of energy you're trying to get from them, because if you ask too much of them, they may not be able to live up to what you're asking, and it can leave them demotivated and backfire against you. So when you're asking for that motivation or you're seeking that energy level or trying to raise the energy level, it's important to only go a few notches above where they're at and try not to expect too much of them. And have the opposite effect. So it's a fine balance. It's a fine kind of line that you can ride and have to draw with motivating them. Of course, we want to do it, but we don't want to push it too far and overdo it for our sake and for theirs.
Yeah, and when we're working with only just a handful of students, maybe we have a one-on-one class that we're doing, or we have a small 3-person, 5-person class. Depending on their age, You don't want to go in there full guns blazing, high, crazy energy. You want to kind of meet them where they're at. So if I have a small class, we'll start class and I'll be kind of at a level 7 energy. As we're going, if I notice that their level is a level 2, then I need to tamper my energy down. Because if I'm trying to drive and get too much from them, especially if they're physically not capable of doing it or they're brand new students, I need to lower my expectation bar. And by lowering my expectation bar, I need to lower my energy level as well. Because if I try to get too much from them, they won't be able to attain that level of energy. It's going to demotivate them. It has a negative effect. And so, like you said, only going just a few notches above them. You want to meet them where they're at. Now, if I'm teaching a large class, I need to do the best I can. That's where my high energy level is at. Because and then in a total atmosphere, they can try to strive and get their best. Because, of course, in that huge class, there's students that are level 7, there's students that are level 10, there's students at level 5, whatever the energy level is for each of those individual students, there's somebody else at their level that they can play off of. But when I'm that person that they have the energy to play off of, I can only be just a few notches above them. And I think that really is key to make sure that you are not losing those students, specifically when you're working in small classes, again, 5 or fewer students. That really is a key concept to take hold of.
One thing I love to talk about as well is that motivation follows action and not the other way around, more often than not. So more often than not, I'm not laying in bed at home thinking, oh man, I really want to get up and clean my room. I really want to clean everything about here. I'm so excited to clean my room. No, not usually. Normally I'm very reluctant to do it. And it's like, oh, well, I know I have to clean my room. And so I start to clean one thing. And once I start to clean the one thing, it's like, oh, well, I might as well clean this other thing too. And then after that, I might as well clean this next thing too. And after that, I might as well clean this next thing too. And I think we can all relate to something like that in some sort of degree. But sometimes you have to get them moving, have to get them doing something. And then you'll be able to watch and see as, because they're already doing it, they start to become motivated and they've already put some work into the action. And then they just continue to go from there. And that momentum starts to build and gain traction, and that motivation starts to grow as well. And that is great. And unfortunately, the flip side to that, it can take a long time to build up that motivation, but it takes just a split second for that motivation to crumble. It can be a very fragile thing. Not in all cases, but very often it can be a very fragile thing. I get super fired up, I'm super excited, and then I make one move, or I do a kick and I fall by accident, or I didn't quite get my self-defense done in a good amount of time, and my partner came back and did something again to me that I wasn't expecting, and that motivation can crumble instantly. It can be very fragile, and sometimes the hardest challenge to motivation is getting people through those hard times of disappointment and failure, because what we want to do is say, oh, I'll just shake it off and keep going or whatever, but that motivation has crashed. That motivation has, for lack of a better word, it's dissipated. It's gone. So you almost have to start from square one again and pushing through those failures and objectives. And like I said, that can be the most difficult thing, is getting people through that and re-motivating them after failures. And I think a great way to do that is to tie it to their identity, in the sense that, I am someone who pushes through obstacles. I am someone who perseveres. I am someone who is able to motivate themselves in all of these different situations. And really going back to the internal and external motivation, giving them a strong sense of internal motivation that they can draw upon in those times of failure and disappointment. Not that we don't need to do that for them, because I think that's another one of our roles as instructors, is to motivate them and get them through those tough and hard times and to deal with failure. But we want them to be able to do it themselves as well, and develop that strong character of being motivated and being able to persevere through ups and downs.
Yeah, and talking about that, and this is maybe not something you can necessarily use directly on the floor, but this is definitely something you can share with your students I think will benefit them greatly, or even yourself. Tying it to their identity, I think, is a important part. And so if you are not the type of person, again, this could be for you, could be for the students or whatever it is. If you're not the type of person to read and you want to start reading, then something you can do is pick up a book and read one page and then close the book and be done. And then the next day, when it comes time to read again, open the book, read one page, close the book, and then be done. And then the next day, and so on. And what that will do is, in your mind, it will take you from somebody who is not a reader into somebody who is a reader. Yeah, I read, maybe it's only one page. And the majority of the time, when you pick that book up to focus on reading one page, that one page will turn into two, and so on and so on. It's the same thing when we go into the gym. If you're not somebody who goes to the gym, if you don't see yourself as somebody who goes to the gym, you won't do that. But if you get your running shoes out and go to the gym, and you plan to be there for one exercise or for 3 minutes on the treadmill, okay, you put your stuff away and then you go home. Again, you do that frequently, then that flips that switch in your brain from somebody who doesn't do those type of things to that type of person who does do those. You are the type of person now who goes to the gym. And just having that switch in your brain will help to tie that to your identity. And so talking about motivating your students and having that tied to their identity, I think can be a bigger part, a bigger overreaching idea that can fill over into other aspects of their life. And again, that doesn't necessarily tie directly to motivating our students, I understand, but I think that's a key point that you can share with your team or with your students in your classes.
Absolutely. Be careful as well, because it can apply on both sides, in the sense that, I am someone who reads. I am a reader because I read these pages or whatever. But as important of a tool, or as useful as a tool that is to shift your identity, it can go the other way, in the sense that maybe one day you didn't read. So then you start telling yourself, oh, like, I'm not a reader. I don't read books. I don't do these things. Just because you experience that one moment or that one time of that failure doesn't make you a failure. It doesn't mean that you can't be those things. And I think it's important to remember that failure is an event. It's not a person. So because you failed one time or you messed up one thing, it doesn't make you a failure. It just means you messed up. You failed. That happens. Okay. Dust off your shoes, get up and move on. And that's a lot easier said than done in some cases, but failure is an event. It's not a person. So because you failed once doesn't mean that you were always going to fail forever. So there is both sides of that. You got to be careful. It's very powerful to tell yourself and to give yourself an identity, but be aware of what you are using as your identity, or what you are telling yourself, because it's powerful both in a positive way and it can be powerful in a negative way. So being aware of what you are telling yourself and what you want your students to tell themselves to shape and to develop their identity is very important. And of course, we all have bad days from time to time. Sometimes you can try as hard as you want. You can do everything right and you just don't feel it, or you just can't get past that feeling of having a bad day or being in a bad mood or whatever. It happens. It happens to all of us for many reasons. So if you have someone that comes to class and you can just tell that they're just down or having a bad day, that is the time when it's most important not to push them too much. Because you push them too much, it could break them. It could make whatever's going on outside of here even worse. And that's the exact opposite of what you do. That's the exact opposite of what you want to do. You want karate class, you want the martial arts studio to be a safe haven. You want it to be a happy place for them. So if they walk in and you can just tell that something's wrong, and maybe you try to make a joke or you try to get them to smile or laugh, and they kind of, chuckle or give you a pity laugh, or they don't smile at all, then okay, I need to be very careful how I approach this person, how I deal with this person today, because I don't want to make whatever's happening worse. I don't want to not try to make it better, but I don't want to push too much where it's going to flip over on its head and become the opposite. So sometimes you'll have to make the judgment call and say, hey, normally this kid performs at a high level today, but something's going on. So if they perform at a lower level, or they're not quite on top of it, maybe I'll let it slide. I'll let it go for today, and maybe they can work through whatever they're working through, and then we'll try again next time. Unless that's a consistent problem, reoccurring thing where the person's just constantly underperforming. Maybe there's a much bigger issue going on, but you're going to have a bad day from time to time, and that's okay. That happens. Like we all have those times and those experiences with our students and for ourselves as well. But being able to be aware of that and traverse that situation carefully as to not make it worse is an important skill to have as an instructor, I think.
So today we talked about motivating our students. And again, motivation and motivating our students is at the heart of what we do as martial arts instructors. It is such an important part to your class and how your studio atmosphere is. Motivation is a key factor in your student success. And so hopefully you can take some information that we've talked about today and apply those into your classes.
But all this being said today, we love to hear how you guys like to motivate your students or how you motivate yourself to get out there and be a better instructor. As always, you can find us online at Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Reddit. On all those platforms, we are at MA Teaching Tactics, MA for Martial Arts, Teaching Tactics. Again, that's MA Teaching Tactics.
Until next time, I'm Chris B.
I'm Chris Kent.